we do record these meetings, so in the event there's a neighbor or anybody who wasn't able to join us tonight, we have a record of that, and they can join us.
Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead, Joanne. I see your hand there.
I'm having kind of trouble hearing you.
All right. Let me see if I can
Thank you.
do better. I don't know if this is any better. I'll try to turn myself up there. Is everybody else able to hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay. Yeah, Joanne, check your volume settings there. Maybe not. I don't know. But I'll try to speak up and try to talk right into my microphone here. By the way, my name is Jeff Hammond. I am a consultant that works for or on behalf of NDOT. That's the Nashville Department of Transportation that you see down in the bottom right-hand corner of your slides there. And tonight we are talking about traffic calming. This is the second meeting we've had. We did have an earlier meeting. We didn't have a very large attendance there, and so talking to Councilwoman Johnston, we decided to have another meeting, and so I'll be presenting some of that same information. But if you were here for that first one, I'm gonna go a little quicker through it, just in terms of some of the basics about the program and so forth. We won't cover in quite as much depth. But I was saying we do record these meetings, so you'll be able to have a link to those if you want to share this. One other housekeeping thing is I think you're all muted now. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question, or like Joanne just did, use that little hand symbol if you want to ask a question, and I'll recognize you. But feel free to do that as we go through the meeting. We don't have to make this real formal. It's a pretty small group, as most of these meetings are, and so I'm here for your benefit. And so I want to certainly make sure that you get all your questions and so forth answered. Just a little bit about what we'll go through. I'll go through just some of the basics of the program and how Oakley got inducted into the traffic calming program, and then we'll look at we'll relook at the conceptual proposal that we have, and then kind of talk about lastly some next steps for the meeting or for the project. Just a little bit about traffic calming. I think at this point in time, most people know what it is and what its intent is. As we do traffic calming projects all over Nashville, the more we do, I think the more familiar people have gotten with our program. We do focus on residential streets, and we do focus on or emphasize physical solutions. That is putting something in the road, or to either have to drive over or to have to drive around. We have found that is the most effective way to lower speeds on our streets. And we put in here speed reduction. That often seems very obvious, but sometimes people will engage us asking, can we get rid of some of the traffic on our streets? And we try not to do that. We try to implement measures that will make people slow down, but not necessarily push them to other streets. That's not one of our objectives. How Oakley got inducted into the program is that it follows a pretty set procedure. There was an application placed by the neighborhood or individuals within the neighborhood. That can go back several years. I don't know exactly when Oakley's application came in, but often we have neighbors that someone put that application in several years ago, and every time we get applications in, we go out and we collect data on the street. And this pie chart here shows you what we do with that data. 70% of the score for a traffic calming prioritization comes from vehicle speeds and the amount of traffic on the street. The other 30% comes from some of the other users on the street, most commonly pedestrians. So if you have a sidewalk, you get lesser points than if you don't. You all don't have a sidewalk in that, and so that helped boost your score. If you have destinations that might make sense for people to walk to more, like a school or a park or a library, something like that, your score also goes up for that. And then there's another 5% that deals with, is there a documented instance of a crash on the street? So we take that data, roll that all together, come up with a score, and most times we're taking the top 25 projects, and in this last cohort, Oakley was one of those. Go ahead, Joanne, I see your hand there.
So you had mentioned that whether or not there's a sidewalk factors into the decision of priority. And so we don't have a sidewalk. Can we, instead of getting speed bumps, just get an actual sidewalk? Because really, no matter what's on the street, we're still walking in the street.
That's right, and that's why we factor that in, because we know that pedestrian concerns are one of the leading reasons why people ask for traffic calming. And yes, no doubt about it, the best thing to do would be able to build a sidewalk. Second to that, or somewhere further down that list, is trying to slow traffic down that at least makes it safer to be able to walk. So we recognize this is not the, if the objective is to get a sidewalk, this is not that. It is, but this is a much lower cost, lower impact way of getting some relief. And it's not to say that you will never get a sidewalk, but certainly that is a very much in demand and a very expensive solution for most streets. And so we're here to, try to get something done, even if it's not a sidewalk. So that's not something that's in our toolbox. There's a whole other process for how they select those and how they go about building sidewalks in residential areas. But good question. Sometimes we do have, I won't go into this in detail with the some of the countermeasures, but we have done things. There's one very close to y'all that's on San Marcos. Sometimes if a street is wide enough, we can kind of carve out sort of like a sidewalk, make it so that there is more of a protected area for walking. We just don't have the room here on Oakley. But that is something we're always thinking about, how can we make it more safe and more comfortable to walk on the street. Here's some of the data specific to Oakley. And by the way, we are going from Trousdale to virtually the end of the street there at Cochran. The speed that we recorded was 35 miles an hour. That 85th percentile is really a statistical way that we in the industry document those speeds. What that says is that 15% of the traffic that's out there is going faster than 35. So that's all a relative ranking that we use. The traffic volume is about 1,200 cars a day, and the width I alluded to earlier, it's fairly narrow, but not uncommonly narrow. 20 feet wide. It's kind of standard for our streets. It's actually a little narrower than what today's standard would be. That's a good thing when it comes to speed reduction. The wider the street tends to encourage faster speeds. So we like working on a 20-foot wide road. And then the length of our project is about a half mile long. I showed this, and this may be helpful to you. So Oakley is the limits that we're working on is the red line there, kind of running east-west along the bottom. And this is a snapshot from an interactive map that's on NDOT's webpage. It just shows kind of the status of different traffic calming projects all over Davidson County. And we like to show it for a couple of reasons. One is just to reinforce the limits of this project and show the status of it. So if you come back here in a few weeks, that color may change, just indicating we're a little further along in the project. But it also shows where we have done projects in the past. Those are the blue dashed lines. So one of our more recent projects was there on Stillwood that comes off of Hogan. That's near to y'all. That's that dashed line over on the left-hand side. Just gives you an idea if you have not encountered speed cushions and want to go see those and drive over those, gives you a place to do that. The other thing we like to point out are the kind of purpley lines, and that indicates places where we have received a traffic calming application, but it has not yet been selected. So if you're wondering or thinking about applying for that. You can see if one of your neighbors or someone has already submitted that. We went through some of the tools in the toolbox. I'm not going to do that again unless there are questions and we need to. But what I will focus on instead is making sure we understand what is being considered for the Oakley project, and it is like the vast majority of our projects now. It is a speed cushion based project. I'll show you the specifics of that here in just a second. But speed cushions, if you're not familiar with them, it is a manufactured device. These are not built up out of asphalt like you have on Overton Road that y'all might be familiar. That was it's a very long-standing traffic calming project. It's been there a good while, and those have held up pretty well, I would say. But we don't build them like that anymore. We use this manufactured speed cushion. It gives us a consistency in it, and they're holding up really well. It's also very quick to implement these. Michael, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. Yes, sir.
Okay. We live on, my wife and I, we just moved into the neighborhood. We live on the other side of Oakley, on the other side of Trousdale, and I'm curious if there's been any study, like, once people get through an area with speed cushions, I think I've seen people in the past, they get through and then they just start speeding again, sometimes faster to make up. They go faster to make up for having lost time before. So is there any consideration for doing all of Oakley, or have there been any studies that show that people that once they get through a slowdown area that they speed up more?
Yeah, it's a good question. We often get the question just a little different than that, which is, well, if we put speed cushions on one street, does it not just make them divert to another street and thereby speed up? And that's a fair question too. Both of those are good observations. We don't have a lot of data specific to this situation. I put our map back up just so we can see. You live over on this western side of Oakley. And we don't have a lot of good data that would show here's exactly what happens once someone leaves a portion of a street that has been calmed and they get into the non-calmed part. We don't have great data even on what happens when they divert. And one reason is because, every neighborhood's different and every situation's a little bit different. My hunch is, and let me answer the other part of your question, which is no, we don't have an application on this part of Oakley. We try when we select these projects to stay very closely to what has been requested. And in this case, what was requested was this section of Trousdale to Cochran. Now, if it's just kind of an unreasonable thing and maybe someone requested one small block or something, obviously we would take it and we would lengthen it and make it a reasonable, project with some termini that makes sense. In our opinion, what was requested does make some sense. Trousdale becomes kind of a decision point for a lot of the traffic. My hunch is most of the people coming out of this section of Oakley that we're talking about turn right on Trousdale, heading out toward Hogan or out toward the interstate. Some I'm sure does go straight through and head on to Regent. But for what it's worth, I mean, we hope that your situation, what you're commenting on, doesn't happen, of course. But in the event it does, what I would say is that that's always fair game for a subsequent traffic calming project. You would have to request that, put in an application, and we would look at that independently.
Yeah, we also live on the other side of Oakley, and I live almost at the corner of Trousdale. We have a lot of traffic, and we also have a lot of kids and animals, and it's getting kind of dangerous.
Yeah.
And we have more traffic than the other side does, so I don't understand why we didn't get included.
Actually, what happens is I think a lot of traffic takes Oakley over to Regent and then goes a short distance on Regent to get to Franklin Pike Circle, because that takes them to the Target shopping center, which is a major, obviously a good, or people who want to take shortcuts leaving the Target shopping center, they can take Franklin Pike Circle down and wind up on Oakley that way.
Yeah. I'm
We
familiar
just need
with
to
that.
call Cole. We just all need to apply, get with Courtney and encourage her to get an application in for us.
That would be the recommendation.
Yeah.
That's right. Is that would be a fair section to TrafficCalm as well. So that's what we would recommend you do. All right, good discussion there. I think we've covered that. I think people are familiar with this. We do different configurations. In this case, Oakley, being that 20 feet wide, would look most like that situation in that upper left-hand corner. This would be a 2 cushion side by side. We don't need anything more than that. So this is what I showed last time for how we envision the speed cushions to be laid out. We think it's 3 sets. The way we come up with that is we look at the total length of this project, which, as I mentioned, was about half a mile long. And then we divide that by what we know to be a good effective spacing, not so long, not so far apart that, traffic will just clear one set and then step on the gas and get to the, just to speed up to get to the next set, but also not so close together that it's just totally obnoxious to you all and might force people to divert to another street. So we try to strike a balance. We have found that if we're somewhere around 400 to 600 feet, sometimes we'll look at 300 to 500 feet, somewhere in that neighborhood. That usually does a pretty good job of meeting our objective, which is just to slow traffic down over the entire length of the project to get a good gradual slower speed. This project is a little different. It has one challenge for us, which I've outlined in yellow that you see here, and that is it's a pretty hilly street, as you all know. And so we have some guidelines that prevent us from installing speed cushions on the steepest part of those hills. We try to stay off of anything that's greater than 5%, but we absolutely do not install on anything at 8% or greater. And y'all got some slopes that are more than 8%. So I've outlined those here. I see you. I'll get there in just a second. I have outlined those here. That's why it looks like our speed cushions are kind of bunched up a little bit. It's because they are. I would like to spread them out a little bit more, but just because of those hills, we've shown it like this. I think it'll give us a good result. I'm not worried about that, but I just wanted to explain why it looks like that. All right, we had another question there. Go ahead.
As far as the hills and getting people to slow down on those, can you put those little posts in the middle, like every I don't know, 6 feet or whatever? In the do you know what I'm talking about? I don't know what they're called.
Well, it may be like you're talking about maybe something like was done. I don't know if you ever drove on Blackman. There was some things put on the center line there that
Maybe
tried to
so.
squeeze people. They get hit, and they get hit an awful lot when we put raised markers and things on the center line of the road. We have done that. It's usually to try and mark a place where we've got a particularly dangerous crosswalk or something like that. So it's not that it's impossible, but I think our experience would say that it's going to be more of a maintenance issue than it's going to actually be very helpful, is what we have seen. But I'll think about that if we're not thinking about the same type of a strategy there, let me know. But I'm thinking of those little plastic posts that you see and that might go right on the center line of the road.
That's what I was thinking.
Was there another question or comment about this?
Another thing I have is so you're talking about the cushions, and a couple of slides ago you had the dimensions, and it says they're 3-inch height. If you end up putting the speed bumps, can you instead use like 2.5 or 2-inch? I mean, they do exist. I found online that they exist, but is that an option?
Yeah, not with our vendor. And the problem with procuring these things through Metro government is they have a competitive bid process. And when they go through that, we have one vendor that we buy from. And ours is called TrafficLogix. They do not offer anything other than 3-inch. So every speed cushion that we're putting down is 3-inch. Now, what we can change are the length that you see here. We have a 7, which is our shortest one. That's where it just kind of ramps up and then immediately turns and ramps back down. We typically reserve those for some very urban areas. It's a more aggressive feel to it, so it slows traffic down more. And then on the other end, we can do a 14-foot where it ramps up. It's got 2 flat sections and then it ramps back down. We typically use those more in very low density suburban or even rural areas where we may want to bring some calming, but really a little bit higher speed is more appropriate. The default, what we're using most often and where we almost always start is the 10.5-foot. So that's a ramp up, 1 flat section, and a ramp down, like you see in the lower left-hand corner. But we don't have anything that we can use that is not 3 inches tall.
Okay.
And right now, what we're specifying is the 10.5-foot. It's kind of that middle of the road in terms of balancing the aggressiveness of speed reduction and a reasonable comfort level.
One thing is there's a quality of life issue because there is actually a lot of noise that you can hear them, like if you live close to one of them. And I think I'm like 2 houses away from one of them. Anyway, I read some threads online about people who have gotten them in their neighborhood. They say that they are effective at getting people to slow down a lot, but you just hear them. And in Spring Hill, they won't put speed bumps unless everybody with property within 100 feet has to sign off on it.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. We have a process that's similar. I'll walk through that. How we make that decision. It's a little different than that, but yeah, there certainly is a public buy-in process that we'll talk about as well. I guess I would advise, because these things, they might be made out of different material, and they may all be different. If you want to go over there to Stillwood, they're also on Farrell Parkway. Farrell Parkway is nice because it's pretty wide. If you want to park on the side street and roll your window down and listen, and get a feel for that, because you're right, there is some noise involved, and so you can certainly experience that firsthand, pretty nearby. All right, good.
I have a family member in West Nashville who talks about the ones on Annex Avenue, and I think there's a feeling that maybe they're spaced too closely together in between, from speed hump to speed hump. Is that sometimes a consideration of what spacing between the speed humps you try to is optimal?
It is, yes, sir. And as I was mentioning, we try to shoot for that 400 to 600. My personal, we're all engineers and we design these, but everybody's got a little bit different opinion. I probably come down on a little bit longer space in between. Particularly, you all have kind of more frontage here, and you're a little bit less of a dense area. I tend to try to get a little more spacing in between on my installations, and so while still being effective, obviously. In this case, we just don't have a lot of wiggle room because of the hills. I think they're probably I could scale these off probably, but I'd say we're over the whole length of the project, we're probably approaching 700 feet average spacing, but in the area where they are, they're nearer to that. So anyway, I think it'll give us a good result there. I can show you, and this is not public yet. It will be that we will be putting these online, but we typically don't do that until we get through these meetings and see if you all, have any changes or things you want to tell us about. But this is a little bit more advanced than what we saw at our last meeting. We have done more of the site work. So part of the project will be, we'll come back in. I know that there's white edge lines on the street, but they're in pretty rough shape. So part of the project will be to restripe the white edge lines down both edge of the road. And then we have specified where these speed cushions would be proposed. And so the first set is very near 491 Oakley. It's just a little bit past Pritchett there.
That's me,
Okay.
491.
That's the one close to you. So that's 50 feet west of the driveway there at 491. So yeah, as you come in from Trousdale, you would encounter that one set before your driveway. And then the next set is heading on down the hill, and that's at 479. And then there's only the one other set is at 462 before Kincannon. After that, you go back up the hill, and so we don't have any toward the end of that street because of the grades. There's one other section to our plans that just kind of show how we lay those out, but I mean it's pretty standard. Just have those one in each lane effectively. I think most of the two of the I guess there's a sign actually at all three of the installations. It's another kind of a policy that we sign anywhere where someone could encounter speed cushions after turning off of a side street. So these signs that you see here would be installed. The other nice thing about that is it keeps people from, trying to circumvent the speed cushions by actually leaving the road. We do have instances where that has happened. So we want to prevent that as much as we can.
Sorry, I didn't catch the last thing you said about. I understand you said something about some people are leaving the road and you want to circumvent that, but what was the last thing you were discussing?
That may have been the last thing, but yeah, we want to make sure that no one can get around the speed cushions. That's why we use a set of two. And we have found sometimes if there's a big shoulder, a big flat grassy area, that people have actually, left the road to try and go around. I don't think we have that situation here. I think you all have more of a defined ditch and maybe some side slopes that are going to keep people from doing that. So I don't foresee that being an issue, but the signs do help discourage that kind of thing too. Any other questions about the plan or what we're thinking about doing there?
I wonder, Mr. Hammond, in the restriping of Oakley, can the western section also be included in that component of this just to be cost effective with our tax dollars? Or is that truly where we need to regroup and Michael and whomever is on that western side, those of us who are on the eastern side, need to still get
It's
together?
Joanne.
Yeah, and we need to team up and say it's the whole Oakley.
They haven't been striped. We've lived here over 30 years and we've not had striping done or
So
any resurfacing or anything
Yeah.
on this side.
And so the condition of that marking is about the same as over on the other side of Trousdale.
Yeah.
Correct. Basically non-existent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll make a note of that and let me check and see if we can extend that part of the program. I think that's certainly a reasonable request, and I'll check that and see if we can't do that while we're out there. It's a good thought.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, let me talk a little bit about the process from here, and we can always go back if you've got other um, so this is a diagram that we use just to kind of describe the process and where we are. So we're at the neighborhood meeting. We're at the red circle, although we're kind of at the baby blue circle down where it says second neighborhood meeting. Because we have done the neighborhood meeting, we have done the design, and now we're at that second neighborhood meeting. And what we will do after tonight is, if there's consensus on where we stand with the plan, and it sounds pretty much like we are, we'll check that other striping question and see if we can get that added in. We will post that online. That'll be on the NDOT traffic calming website. Make sure you know where that is before we break up tonight. And then we'll move into a ballot process. And this is where, as we're mentioning, cities do it a different way, but we do like to make sure that everyone's had a chance to look at this process and think about the project and then have a say on it. It's a ballot process. I'll give you the details of that. And then assuming that passes and is favorable, we move then into the construction process. We like to show this too because it gives you some idea of time frame, and I don't want anybody to leave tonight thinking, that there's going to be speed cushions out there, in the next month. It's just it's not that quick. The ballot process is about 2 months by itself, and then right now we have a backlog of construction projects that's close to a year, maybe a little sooner than that. We say 8 to 10 months. So there's still some time involved at this point. A little bit about the voting process. What we will do is we will send out cards. You may have received one for this meeting. You may not. If you're in the project limits, you should have. But that's we'll talk about who gets to vote for this in just a second. But we will be sending out cards to the people who are allowed to vote on it. And it basically just has a QR code that you can use your phone, and it goes to a Nashville.gov page where you basically just give your information, your address, and whether you're for the project or not. You can also link to the plans there. We want to make sure people know what they're voting for or against on, and so that information is there as well. That process stays open for 6 weeks. At the end of 6 weeks, we close the ballot, and then we look at those responses. And if 2/3 of the people who responded have voted for it, we'll move the project forward. We don't care about the number of voters. Usually, it's just like a real election. It only counts if you vote. So we're not looking for, a set number of people who live there. That does go to, it's on this slide. That does go to the owners of these properties. So if you're renting or you have a neighbor who is renting and it's not the registered owner, those cards and those votes do go to the owners of the property. If anyone owns more than one property, they only get one vote. We're only looking at residential properties. I think everything here is residential, and I think everything here, I don't think anything is a vacant. We may have one. It's like there may be one vacant piece of property there, meaning there is no house on it. Just an unimproved lot. Any questions on the voting process? Who gets to vote or anything like that?
Well, you're saying that it only goes to a vote if we decide to move forward from this meeting. Of the people who live on this zone, am I the only person who doesn't want speed bumps?
I live at 498, and I definitely do want speed bumps. Having seen a child ejected 18 feet into the air and never walk again, I don't ever want to see that again.
Yeah, and what we would do is, even if everybody on here did not want them, we're still going to put that vote out. And we encourage you, get together as a neighborhood, meet, talk to your neighbors, walk up down the street, canvas people, try to get them to vote one way or the other. We don't care. We like that interaction. We think it's good for these projects, but we'll still put that out, and then people can vote however they want to vote. We obviously don't release that. We don't tell who voted which way or anything like that. But the records, the outcome of each of those votes is available on the website as well. If you want to see, how neighborhoods have voted in the past, it's available. There's my information. That's a good way to get in touch with me. But I do want to show you one other tool that we're kind of piloting for Oakley. Oakley and one other project right now are the only projects that have this. That's a link to the Traffic Calming website. But this information here is pretty special to Oakley. It's something we're trying to move everyone to. NDOT is trying to move all public engagement for their projects to this Engage.Nashville.gov. And so you'll find all this information about the project right there on this website. It's got a place where you can give comments. You can say anything you want to, positive or negative, about the project, and all of that is certainly welcome information. So if you want to engage and leave comments, thoughts about it, please feel free to do that. Engage.Nashville.gov. You'll see this page. If you just scroll down from this page, you'll see the Oakley Drive Traffic Calming project pretty prominently there. That's really all I have tonight. I appreciate everyone. Put back my information. Appreciate everyone joining. Any other thoughts or questions as we wind down here?
Hey, Jeff, I
think
know
so.
it's kind of late. Did you discuss any other options outside of speed cushions this go around? I know the first meeting we discussed maybe speed limit or like radar detection type stuff, or squiggly lines or anything along those lines. Or I know one neighbor mentioned doing like mini roundabouts. If you didn't discuss that previously, do you mind weighing in on that factor now?
Sure. Yeah, we did do that last time. We talked more generally about some of the tools that are in our toolbox in traffic calming projects, because we've kind of settled on a speed cushion based project. We didn't go back through those, but yeah, all of those are certainly options. I think one thing that does limit us here a little bit, especially in terms of like anything at an intersection, is the width of the road. We just don't have a lot of width to work with, but there certainly are things you could do in the order of pavement markings and things like that. I think the question is the effectiveness. Certainly, it's less inconvenient to drive over a speed cushion, but I think I would also say that if we just limit it to a pavement marking based project, you're probably not going to see the level of speed reduction. We do have radar feedback signs, which I know you all are familiar with. They're on Trousdale and Hogan and some other streets. That is certainly a tool that we can deploy, again, usually instead of speed cushions. But I think again, it's a lesser level of speed reduction, but certainly those are valid.
Well, I don't think you talked about those at all at the beginning of this meeting. So you did last time, but there were only 2 people from the block on here.
Yeah, give me
So,
just a second, and I'll run.
So I think the people who are on this call who weren't there need to weigh in on what those other options are and whether those are desirable at all.
Okay. Again, that meeting is recorded, so if you want to see the full context of that, that's available as well. But I'll be happy to go back. These are the slides from that first meeting. So we talked about the speed cushions, speed tables. I think it's a very close cousin to the speed cushion or the tables, just a different configuration there. we have some before and after data. This is one of the tools we were talking about, the feedback sign. Again, you're probably familiar with those and have seen those. We do have some before and after data that speaks to their effectiveness. I think the question is, in the long term, how long does that effectiveness hold out? That's something that NDOT is still gathering information about and collecting. Some people swear by them and say it absolutely has made a difference, and other people not so much. So the jury is kind of out from a data standpoint on those.
Respectfully, I think all it does is tell me I'm speeding. It doesn't change whether I put my foot on the accelerator or the brake. It just simply says you're doing 37 when you're coming down the hill on Trousdale. I don't see anybody applying their brakes. It just acknowledges we're speeding.
Yeah.
I think it would do the same here.
Yeah, there are no cops out giving tickets.
Right.
Yeah.
Particularly when it's not a real throughway, as this neighborhood is
Yeah.
not. You all drive this street every day, and so you will certainly be used to seeing that every day. Pavement marking can be an effective thing, especially if the street is really wide like this one. Sometimes if we can visually narrow the street by putting pavement marking in, that can help. And then y'all may be familiar with like Blackman again. I know there were some zigzags and some creative things that were tried. Blackman's a unique case because speeding is very high, but it also has a very high traffic volume, way above the threshold that we will use something like a speed cushion on is 5,000 cars a day. It's probably close to 15, like 3 times the amount. So it's been a real dilemma on how to slow traffic on a street like Blackman. But in any case, some
That's
things
great.
like pavement markings were attempted. There are some bigger applications of pavement markings. Again, this is when you have big intersections and typically more urban areas where you have more traffic and more pedestrian activity. But we can do things like bulb outs where we effectively shorten the turning radius and try to bring about slower speeds, for cars turning in and out of an intersection. That has its place. Again, I think here that's probably not so much of an issue as it is just speeding along the corridor. Chicanes are an urban type of a treatment that has been done, not very much in Davidson County. There's only 2 or 3 streets that have these, but it introduces an artificial meandering of the street. It can be effective when you have things like on-street parking that you see here that really give you something, you have to slow down to avoid, like a parked car. And then traffic circles, we did mention, again, it takes an awful lot of pavement, a very big intersection. And these are done, I would say, infrequently still by NDOT. There are some cases. They can bring about some unintended consequences. Things like school buses can have a hard time, and so the conditions have to be just right for these to work very well and not result in some of those difficulties. So those are the tools that we really have, in the toolbox of traffic calming. So anyway, we're certainly open to relooking at that. But I don't see as an effective solution of whether it's a pavement marking or a radar feedback sign, which are probably the 2 more leading candidates. And I think, John, something you mentioned there.
As always, Jeff, appreciate your time and information.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining, and feel free, to get back to us, whether it's on Engage or just my email address, and be glad to continue the conversation there. But we'll kind of hold that open maybe for another week or 2, and then see where we are at that point, and then move into that ballot process if appropriate. So.
Jeff, thank you again. It was an informative meeting. I appreciate that.
Very well. Yeah. Well, thank you all. Hope you have a good rest of your evening.
And you the same. Thank you. Good night, everyone.